Hello there, it's Cookies. And today I wanted to. So I've got the second to last LA Arco turn pulled up. And today I wanted to kind of go over just some of my thoughts and reflections on the nation. I don't feel like I really got to experience everything LA Arco can do. So I don't think it's fair for me to do a review on the nation. I did learn some really cool things, so I can go over some of those. Uh, for instance, your where is it? The dust summons, these cares. You can divine name them or gift of reason them, and you can break into blood with them. They turn into D1 blood 1 mages. And I guess potentially you could do some empowering and break into vampires, and that you can really break into blood in a big way through that. So that's a cool late game option. Some other things I learned is when you're running around with these, like, because I was a smaller Arco in kind of the late game, you know, definitely the late game over turn 100. Um, I don't have much option but to run around with like uh, kind of like a late game communion, but it's because I had such a low gem economy, I wasn't willing to risk my tougher casters after the fights for Satala. And so I just had to adapt to a form of life where I knew my armies were going to get flamed from the sky or potentially murdering wintered, stuff like that. And so, fortunately, I never ended up getting hit by murdering winter. I think that's what the Sea Kings were setting up here, but we managed to mind hunt them. But you know, having to like spam out Demon Banes for the fire resistance and then the additional HP at least gives them a shot at surviving murdering winter. So having to spam that out for the masters and then spamming out, 2 or 3 times the number of slaves needed because a certain number of can die, so that I can get all the buffs I need on my troops for the ones that also survive all the remote spells. Like, it's definitely a somewhat painful way to play. You got to make sure you have redundancy on your casting. You got to make sure that and and so I guess there's two kind of philosophies on running around with these types of late game communions. This particular map, this mountain arena map, is prone to doom stacking. So I had to adopt a philosophy of just accepting that most of my mages and troops were going to die every time I took a fort from Pangea. I think on a more open map, you can do the more traditional strategy, which is smaller communions doing a smaller subset of buffs. And you can have more armies that way, and you'll be less likely to hit the threshold where an enemy will feel like it's worth it to hit you with flames from the sky. So that's kind of the idea there. So there's two different ways to play it with human mages this late in the game. And I just went with the method where, I'm just assuming I'm going to lose 50 to 75% of my army, even if I win a battle, because of remote attacks. The battle itself could kill a lot of mages. So it definitely made for some logistical headaches. The constant ferrying of mages and troops from the homeland. Some other interesting things. I never did completely find out what the point of Fire 6 on the Demi-Lich was. I'm sure somebody else would have just known immediately, but I'm looking around and I just don't see it. Like, you don't need them necessarily for flames from the sky because you can climb fire. He can't move, So it's not a battlefield spell. Um, and you've got all this, yeah, just all this fire. So maybe it was just for the bless, where you get the attack skill +4. But I'm not sure. Like, yeah, attack skill +4 is really good on these guys. Brings them up to 15 attack. But I mean, the mages are your real workhorse. So yeah, I guess maybe it was like a early game or mid game thing. But I never did find out what Fire 6 was truly for. Maybe controlling Eternal Pyre, but then I don't know what you do with the fire gems. Maybe you just spam flames from the sky. Seems like a weird late game plan to me. So, yeah, that was something I never did quite figure out. And I never really got to explore some of the other summons. So, and you do have some cool summons. So you have I think it was in this army. You have some of these lampads, and they're neat because they have a really big patrol bonus. So if you do break into blood, you have amazing summons for doing the patrolling for it, using just a few death gems. And they're invulnerable, they have recuperation, and you can add these units for Stygian Pass, so you can take advantage of that. So I understand the death pass on this guy, because you can do, assuming he can use Stygian Pass. I'm not sure if you need movement, but maybe if he was death 5 at some point, you could do this, or you could put some sort of booster on him. And then you can travel around with lampads. I'm not sure if he can use it, though. I'm not sure if you need movement speed to be able to use that particular spell, kind of like Cloud Trapeze versus Teleport. Some other things. It was really difficult to break into air. We did have the national hero who was helping. He was sight searching air. We got this helmet from Bogarus, I believe. But yeah, it was very difficult to break into air. I don't think we ever got a decent air income. Yeah, just +1, even from all these provinces. So that's late age for you. And this was kind of our gym breakdown, so definitely wouldn't call it gym rich, that's for sure. So that, I mean, that was interesting. Trying to, so it was really hard to kind of paint my army with fog warriors and other key air buffs that you would expect in the late age. If I had prioritized my nature gems differently, I could have gotten a Fairy Queen and potentially used that to break into higher air. But the problem with the Fairy Queen is it's reasonably low HP. So if you try to run that with your army, it can also die to flames from the sky unless you gear it a certain way. So you'd probably have to give it a Demon Bane or a Ring of Fire Resist, something like that, so it could survive. And you'd probably want to, because it is so valuable, you might want to give it Cold Resist too. So it can just be kind of hard to get going with that Fairy Queen. But I mean, you at least have a way to break into air. It's just not what I would call easy. The troops. I'd watched a couple of other reviews on LA Arco, and they seem to disparage the troops, but I thought the troops held up reasonably well in the late game. You know, when you just paint them with buffs, I mean, they're as good as any other troop, it seemed like, where they could stand in front of the centaurs and just sit there while the mages killed everything. The mystics are still really good. You just get, like, it's just a weird variety pack. So you have to bundle a bunch of them together and then see what you have. So here's the mystic. So you have all these different randoms. So you're guaranteed one random, but then you could potentially have up to 3 more. So it could be a 5-path mage, or it could be a 2-path mage. And you might have like, what is that, like, you might have 2 in a path. You can potentially random 2 in all of these paths. Or you might just have a bunch of 1s. You might end up with 1 in everything. So definitely some variety there. I think the ones with a path in everything make great communion slaves because they'll take less fatigue. So if you have a mystic with 2 in a path, you can make them a master, and then a mage with 1 in a path makes a pretty good slave. Because yeah, they'll just take less fatigue. You can have more varied communions that way. So if you have 16 to 20 mages that all have the 4 single paths, then you can actually set up a really robust communion, at least on your national paths, where you're using the earth, water, astral, and I forget the other one. Earth, water, astral, fire. Yeah. And you should be able to cast all of those on the national paths, and your communion should hold up reasonably well. So it's not the most difficult thing in the world to build at least one stable communion, and then you have to consider your options a little bit more when incorporating nature and death, which are really good communion paths you have access to, or when you don't have those 4 paths, a lot of those mages with all 4 paths available as slaves. Maybe you want to design on a more open map, you design smaller communions that take advantage only of like 1 or 2 of the paths. So definitely some cool stuff there. I really like having national healing. I felt so spoiled. I was really happy to take advantage of that. It really helped with holding this Throne of Death with the Plague Water stream, because Pangea also has a sort of natural immunity to it because their troops have recuperation. So it was really easy for them to hold this. It was difficult for me to take it, and these healers made it so that the army could hold that for a number of turns until I could, move off of it or take this fort. So that was really important and really useful, and I was pretty happy to be able to use the healer trait on the mages. I think it's an underrated trait because afflictions really kind of destroy combat efficiency of your troops and make them perform significantly worse. So being able to heal up afflictions and make your troops like new again is really nice. Definitely loved having a group of this whole troop travel with the army and heal up a lot of these afflictions. Even then, I was just building up tons of afflictions, but it wasn't the worst, and you can kind of see that in the army here. Like we still had a pile of afflictions, but 1 or 2 more turns and we probably could have healed all of those. So yeah, so you can end up doing things that can ruin your army, or have the enemy do things that ruin your army, and you have the ability to recover from that with your most expensive troops. You can really take care of old mages so that's not even a problem. It enables tons of mind hunt spam. You can really risk it with mind hunts on things that definitely might have 1 nature or 1 astral mage. Normally you might shy away from that. Having an astral 4 feeble-minded by an astral 1 really sucks, but because you can recover from it quickly, it's not a big deal. So all 3 of these mages were feeble-minded at different points, so being able to have them back so that they can keep on mind hunting is really good. And I would say you can mind hunt with the best of them. It's clear the previous player was experimenting a lot with transformation. I like transformation. I just happened to get burnt the last couple of times I used it, where my mages died, even in luck scales. So I was like, all right, I'm going to take a little bit of a break from all the transformation spam that I've been doing. Some other thoughts. These cavalry commanders are really nice. The +1 inspirational and the +1 here. Kind of makes these guys pointless, I guess. I guess these guys can hold an extra squad. But I didn't realize that until a little bit later, that these are definitely the far superior commander, and they don't get old. And I think they have more hit points. Yeah, so they're a little bit tougher too. So I really like these as your national commander. Probably more so than some of the hoplite guys, because they have more movement speed too, so they can run back and pick up reinforcements faster. Another unit that I think is a little underrated are these guys. I still kind of liked these guys even in the late age. They're very easy to spam out, and they can make decent, at least on the battlefield, they can make decent little bodyguards just by existing. So they perform the function of buying time for your mages extremely well. They have, I don't know, they die in 1 or 2 hits, but, you know, at least they're there. And it frees up your more valuable hoplites and heart. Are these the heart companions? Yeah, they free up your heart companions to go actually push the enemy. Because as much as I like having the ball of mages just spamming stuff out and then having the troops around that, I still like having a couple of big squads that push the front line forward. I think being able to push into the enemy mages and kill them is really valuable. So I liked being able to run that aggressive front line where we had the heart companions out front, maybe on the flanks, in the rear, and then the less capable bodyguards like the hoplites and the peltasts in the center. Speaking of the hoplites, they still have decent protection, even for late age. I'm not sure if in the late game there's a big difference between them and the phalangites or the hypaspis. I just recruited the hoplites because, I don't know, I liked the protection, I liked the name, kind of kept things easier to organize, but I don't have any true feelings one way or the other between the 3 of them later in the game, when you can paint them with buffs. I didn't recruit a lot of these at Game Champions because they're expensive. So these guys are only 13 gold. Your Heart Companions are only 20 gold. So I wasn't seeing the value of these guys. And I definitely didn't see the value when I stole a bunch of centaurs and I was able to use them as my cavalry contingent. The elephants are really fun. They can make an okay raid, but as you saw, their magic resistance is terrible, so I promptly had all of them stolen, which was unfortunate. But if Pan had opted to take this battle, I think we had a decent chance of trying to steal them back, so that could have been fun. Some other things that you have access to, so if you do break into death, either via Pretender or some other means, you can definitely do some soulless shenanigans with your research monkeys. So you could you cast Life After Death, and then maybe you have something come in and kill a bunch of mages, or you do like foul vapors and Life After Death, and then you hit yourself with a couple of small horror attacks, and then maybe you have their full script just be something useless, and then you get a bunch of soulless. So you do have access to that. You could communion up these mages and do a soul vortex, or your sacred national mages if they get the death randoms. And you can do soul vortex to force units to die and turn into soulless. So you have that option. I do think because of the MR, and the hit points, you want to keep them as research monkeys. And we were well past the point of needing research monkeys, so I didn't do too much of it. But I did try to preserve the ones I had because they're free upkeep. So that was kind of the idea there. It's a really versatile nation. You have a lot of tools. In terms of diplomacy, I had really good relationships with Utgard, who ended up winning, and Bogarus. Had an okay relationship with Batala in this game, but I really liked the player, and they were in my relay game as TNC, where they kicked my butt. So there's definitely some good players in this. I liked the diplomatic part. I just had like this. I felt like I was playing my own mini game where I was just in this weird war with Pangea that never ended because I had no one else to really attack. I definitely didn't want to attack the game leader, so Pangea it was. And Pangea was my only option to attack for a long time as well. Um, I was pretty happy with how I played this game. Being able to threaten Pangea's cap, I think we could have taken it, is really cool. We made a lot of progress. I know it wasn't a lot of provinces, but we retook Lithia, which was the fort that we lost in the first turn we supped in, where all we got to see was a battle where a bunch of our mages died. We took Sitala, which was a throne off of Pangea, walking through a plague water stream, no less. We took Valcoria. We took Land of Plenty. So taking 4 forts off of a player that nominally has 3 caps. It took him a long time to clean up the Calum stuff. But a player that's around 3 times as big should have been able to kill us, or at least keep us bottled up, and we were able to break out of that. And I think we were, because of the damage Utgard did, I think we were on track for potentially taking over this part of the column, and then I think we could have just outright beaten Pangea. So I was feeling pretty confident about the matchup, especially how it was being played. Some other things, it's, let's see, research. Is there any other national spells? I don't think so. Yeah, there were. I never really used the Rhapsodies. Just, I don't know, a lot of the, like, single point buffy type of things I just don't end up learning sometimes. It would have been cool to get a Hamadryad, but if I remember right, I think these are healers. I'm not sure if we needed more healers. They should also be a big nature mage, but we had all the nature we needed as part of our communions. You have access to Sow Dragon Teeth. I did a little bit of that. It's a pretty good spell. Brass Bull, Craft Keladon. It would have been cool to get some of this stuff. But yeah, never got to play with necessarily all the national spells. Let's see if there's any others. From Death Comes Life. Yeah, I think we had pretty decent growth scales. I'd rather just take the scale than waste gems putting growth in particular provinces generally. I don't think we ever played with Hounds of Twilight. Monster Boars. We did do Procession of the Underworld and Bind Carries, so we were starting to play around with the national summons. Yeah, I think it's a reasonably strong nation. It's just at least the way we were playing it, it was a fairly slow nation. If it weren't Mountain Arena, which it's kind of funny because every battle can kind of become like a weird Thermopylae situation where because of all the mountains they have to attack you in a particular spot and you get to arrange all your hoplites there. If it were a more open map with more raiding options, I think Pangea just overwhelms us as long as they're reasonably aggressive, and then they can just invade us and we just lose, which is what I thought would originally happen. So there is that kind of aspect. I think the map was favorable to LA Arco versus some of the stuff that Pangea can do. So I think it negated some of their strengths. It was hard for their dryads to sneak in. We were able to patrol a lot of places. It was hard for like parties of satyrs to sneak in as well. I'm not saying that they weren't able to get in here, but I never really ran into a situation where they were doing much of anything harmful. Sitting on Satala, we did have a couple of mages stolen, and I I don't know, they're just mages. They're just humans, so it didn't really bother me too much. So I don't think you necessarily need to be scared of dryads as Arco. Just give the mages you really care about some morale boosting items, and hopefully they can win out in the assassination battle. And yeah, I think that's it. Hopefully, hopefully I taught you something. Having the alchemy stone was nice for money, at least briefly. But it's it's definitely a faction that I can tell there's a lot more to it, and I haven't fully explored it. So I don't think it's fair for me to give a full review on it, but I can at least talk about the different things I did with the nation and what I encountered with the nation, and hopefully you got something useful out of this video. And maybe it'll help you in a future Arco game. And yeah, I think I'll see you in the next one, and good luck.